Hi, fellow Django developers. Ezekiel here from alwaysdjango.com, where we discuss interesting Django topics that help you grow, improve as a Django developer. If that sounds interesting, like, subscribe, share this video with anyone if you find this video important. Let's get into it. So, we are going to, in the last tutorials in our Django Absolute Beginner playlist, we looked at Django admin panel, right? How to use Django admin panel, how to create a super user, log in the super user, and use the Django admin panel, right? Now, in that tutorial, we mentioned that we'll be going over how to like completing the CRUD. CRUD, if you don't know what CRUD is, CRUD, right? Stands for create, read, update, and delete, right? So we have done the creating, we have created books, we have been able to create books during our playlist. If you have been following, you know that we are creating an application. Let me reload this. You know that we have been creating an application that manages books, right? Where an authenticated user can create a book and it will list out his books, right? Then what we are able to create, right? We are able to create books here, and we are able to list books, right? So we have implemented creating and reading, right? Is remaining updating and deleting. So in this tutorial, we'll be looking at how to update and delete Django database queries, right? So what we want now is that we'll have two buttons here under every book. It will say delete or edit and delete, right? One will be for editing, one will be for deleting, right? So if we come here, come to this list book template, right, which is the template we are using to list the books, which is the template that is being rendered here. We'll come here and add, let me say, class container, right? Bootstrap container. Don't know why I'm adding even a container, but whatever, right? So after this container, we add a href, right? Href, let's say this will be empty right now. Let's say class of btn primary. This one will be for editing, right? We say edit here. Then we have href. Then it will also be empty. Then class of btn danger, right? Then this one will be for deleting, right? So if we go back, if you don't know about this, this is simply Bootstrap. If you don't know about Bootstrap, you can check on YouTube. There are many tutorials and stuff like that. So if you come here and reload, you can see the two buttons, right? Obviously they are not doing nothing now, right? So we'll be looking at how to update and create delete and update queries, and we'll be using generic views, Django generic views, right? So that you also understand the Django generic view. So if you don't know about, we have a playlist in this tutorial where we went really in depth and everything about Django generic view, right? So you can go and check the playlist out. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It should be popping out on your screen right now, right? So if we go back to our views.py, which is obviously where we write our logics, right? So if we go back to our views.py, generic views are class-based views, right? So if you see here, we have been using function-based views, right? And that's like the main reason why I opted to discuss this, right? So that we'll look at class-based views. Say from Django.views.generic, we import two class-based views, right? One of them is the update view, then delete view, right? Okay, the update view and the delete view. The update view for updating the instances, while the delete view for deleting the instances, right? So after doing this, I'll add this class-based views right on top here. So we'll start from let's start from the delete view, right? I have a reason. Let's start from the delete view, right? So we say class, like class-based views, right? So we say delete book, the name of the class, right? Then we say pass here. So if we have created the class, then the next thing is to inherit from this, right? So if we inherit from this, right? Then after that, like classes, if you know about classes generally in programming, classes has method and properties that you can override, right? So just like this one, we have methods and properties that we can override. Obviously, like we'll be overriding properties only right now, right? So what do we want to tell this delete view? If you think about it, you want to tell it which template it should use for the deleting, right? You should also tell it which URL you'll be redirected to after the deleting process. Then after that, you tell it also which model, right? Which database model we are deleting, right? So to do that, we simply say models. If you are using VS Code, you can just hold on Control, press spacebar, and options will come out for you, right? So first one is the model. So which model are we working with, right? Obviously this is the book model, right? So this is the book model, this is the model that we'll be deleting from, right? So after that, you tell it the template name, the template we'll be using for this deleting. The template, let's call it delete.html, right? After the template, we add success URL. Success URL is which URL should I redirect to after successfully deleting a book, right? Let's say the URL let's say we want a user to be redirected to this same URL, right? Slash, that's the URL is slash list books, right? Slash list book, that's the URL we want to be redirected to. So we'll come here and say success URL, say list books, right? If I'm right, let's check again. It says list books, right? So this is the model we are working with. This is the template we'll use and work with the deleting process. Now this will be the URL will be redirected to, right? So if we copy this, let's simply copy this, or let's test the deleting process, right? Let's comment this out and test the deleting, right? So if we come here, if we copy this class name, then go to urls.py. Obviously we want to add this to our URLs. So if we import from books.views from our views.py file, from our books.views file, we import this delete book class, right? So we import this delete book class, then we come under here, we come below here, so we say path, right? Path is, let's call it delete book, right? So after deleting the book, we say which view do we want to use. We want to use the delete book view, but it is a class, right? If you have been following this tutorial, when we used when we implemented this login view, right? And I also mentioned that this is a generic view, a class-based view, right? So for class-based views, for you to be able to use them, right? If you check here, these are function-based views. This is a function-based view. This is a function-based view, right? You just give a reference to them, right? But for class-based views, you use this dot as view, right? So you use this dot as view to tell Django to treat it as a view function, right? Something like that, right? So what's the name? Let's call it delete book, right? So if you think about it, let's add this comma, this trailing comma here. So if you think about it, right? So if you look at this URL right now, our function does not know the book to delete, right? What am I trying to say? If you say delete book, right, this can be any book, right? So what we want to do is that we come here slash, right? We say this is pk, right? We say int, mistake. So we say int, and this is pk, right? So what are we trying to say here? We're trying to say that anytime we want to delete a book, right, that will be passing an ID, and this ID will be used to identify this book, right? Let's call it ID, right? So this ID will be used to identify this book, right? So anytime we'll be passing an ID, anytime we'll be redirecting to this URL, we use an ID, right? We specify an ID, and that ID will be used to identify that book that is to be deleted, right? If that makes sense. So if we go back to our views.py, if you can remember, we added this template here, we specified this template here, and we don't have this template in our templates folder. So if we come here, copy this, let me expand this. So if we come to our templates folder, let me create delete.html, right? So if we come to delete.html, what do we want in this delete.html? We simply want the user to be, we simply want to say something like, are you sure you want to delete this book, right? Something like that. Are you sure you want to continue with this deleting process or stuff like that? So if we come to, let's say create book, right? let's say create book and paste it, right? So just like we have, again, if you don't really understand this tutorial, like I'm trying my best to explain it, right? But if you don't really understand, I'll leave a link to our playlist, right? A playlist, our Django generic playlist tutorial will discuss all this in depth, right? And we also have the create generic view, which is used for creating, which we will not talk about in this playlist, but it's still similar to this. Just watch that tutorial so that you watch that playlist so that you have more in-depth understanding about Django generic views, right? So this should be delete book obviously, and okay, let's have this like this right now, right? So if we go back to our list book, what do we want to have here? We want to change this URL. Now we want to change this URL to a URL path called delete book, right? We want to change this to a URL path called delete book. If we go back to our where is that, our urls.py, url.py, we say the name of this URL is delete book. So if we go back to this list.html, this URL should be delete book. Now we pass in the ID, right? So if we check here, we are looping over each book. If we loop over each book, we output the name, the description, right? So we also want to pass in the ID here, right? So we say book.id, right? So what this will do right now is that it will in this URL path, it will output a path similar to this. Let me say /delete book, right? /ID of the book. Let's say the ID of the book is 1. Let's say 1, right? That's the URL path that will be outputted here, right? Because the URL path is this /book/ID, right? So it will output that right here, right? So let me clean this. So our server is running. If we go back, refresh, everything is okay. So if we inspect this, the URL path, you can see, like I said, you can see this is /delete/ID, right? The ID of the book is 1, right? So if we click on this, fingers crossed, if we click on this, okay, so generic detail view delete must be called with either an object pk or a slug, right? Sorry, this should be pk, right? Instead of ID here, we'll call this a pk, right? So that's the name that the Django generic view delete view is expecting. Should be pk, not ID. So if we go back and refresh, so you can see right here that we have delete book, and this is this template right here, right? So what do we want to do? Let's change this. This should be class danger, right? Then this will be delete, or should we say continue? Let's say continue, right? So we want to let's output some kind of alert. Let's say div class alert. This is a bootstrap class. If you don't know about bootstrap, go and check a tutorial and brush yourself up a little bit. So we want to say, are you sure you want to delete this book, right? Are you sure you want to delete this book? That's something like confirmation. Are you sure you want to delete this book? Let's say yes, we want to delete it. Let's say click on continue, and the book has been deleted. You can see that there is no book here anymore, right? So this is what happened. If we go back to our views.py file, you can see right here that we specify the model we want to use. You make use of a template and the URL path, the success URL, right? So this success URL is the URL path you want to be redirected to after successfully deleting a book, right? So the next thing will be looking at update process, right? How to update the book instances. So if we go back here, there is no book here right now. So let's create a book real quick. The name of the book is new book, and the description of this is a description, right? So let's create. We have created the book, right? Delete is working right now. Let's work on edit, right? So if we come back here, go to views.py files again. Let's uncomment this, change the name and modify. right? So let's say this should be update book, right? Then we change this to update view, right? They're exactly the same thing. We say we have the model is book. That's what we want to work with. The template name should be update, in this case update.html, right? So if we go back here to our delete.html, let's copy this, let's create the template. The template should be update.html, right? Then we'll click enter. Let's paste this. So after pasting, we have to let's simply edit this template. Let's change this to, this should be update book, right? Let's remove this alert, we don't need it no more. So right, so let's continue. What else? Okay, let's go to the url.py file. Let's import the update book, right? After importing update book, we come here, we update this. We say path is equal to update slash integer. It should be pk, right? Pk. So this should be update. This should be update book dot as view. Don't forget, guys, at view, right? So add the name is update book. Then we add the trailing comma, right? Then we copy this, go to the list books template, go to update right here, right? We come here, we add this, right? URL this, then book.id. Then after that, update, this is the model, this is the template, this is the success URL, right? So if we go back to our application, we'll come here, reload. So if we click on delete, this is what we have. We'll go back, click on update. So fields, sorry guys, for update you have to specify the fields you want to update. The fields we want to update are the name field and the description field, right? So if we go to our models, we have 4 fields here. We have the name, the description, the is published, the date created, right? Is published is a default, has a default value, default of true, right? Default of true here, right? So what we are saying here is that when we want to update a book, we want to output a field for these 2 values, right? So if we go back and refresh, we can see that we have a space here for the name of the book and the description of the book. Then this submit button, let's change this button right here to a primary button, right? So that it will not look, should not appear like a danger button, right? Danger is for destroy, right? So let's change this thing to primary, right? So after that, let's refresh again, right? So we have update book. If we should update this book to new book 2, right? Description to description 2, and let's continue. Yeah, so you can see that the book name is updated, the book description is updated, right? So we have successfully implemented the update and delete CRUD functionality. But there is a problem here, guys. When we talked about authentication and permissions, right? So this URL right now, if we go to update, if we copy this URL, open an incognito window, right? Open an incognito window, paste this. Let me increase the screen so that you can see it. So if we open an incognito window, it's loading. So if we open an incognito window, you can see that the user is not logged in here, right? Let me increase this. So you can see that the user is not logged in. You can see login and sign up, but the user is still able to update this, right? So, and as awesome as it can be, as stupid as our functionality looks now, a user that is not logged in can even update this, right? So we'll implement authentication and permission, right? A user that is not logged in can make this because we are going back to list book and it's out. So but if you go back here and reload and refresh list book, you can see that the name has been updated, right? So we'll look for a way to implement authentication and permission in our class-based views, right? For our function-based view, we simply add this decorator here, then run an if statement and what have you, then filter this in terms of the filter the books in terms of the authenticated user, right? So but for class-based views, we do it a little bit different, right? So in our Django generic playlist, in our Django generic views playlist, we discussed all this in depth, right? In depth of all this. I'll leave a link to it in the description. You should go and check it out, right? So first thing, let's implement authentication, right? Let's make sure that a user that is logged in is able to access this URL, right? Without being logged in, you cannot access this URL. So let's implement authentication. So if we go to, so if we say from, let's import from Django.contrib, right? Our Django authentication framework, the auth.mixins, we import the login required mixin, right? Login required mixin is just a mixin that is like mixins. Let me say they are classes, right? They are abstract classes. If I'm right, someone should correct me. Classes that can only be inherited from are probably called abstract classes, right? I don't know if I'm right. If I'm wrong, someone should correct me in the comments. But I feel classes that you can only inherit from are called abstract classes. That's what I feel, right? So so this is an abstract class. If what I'm saying is correct, this is an abstract class, so we can only inherit from it. So if we inherit from this class, if we go to our, let's go to our login view right here, and we inherit from this, right? So by inheriting from this, it's just like the login required decorator here. It's just like the login required decorator. Without being logged in, you can no longer use this route, right? So if we go back, our incognito window is on right here. So if we go back, if we go to the delete view, right? If we come here, copy this URL, come to the incognito window, come here and paste it and press enter, you can see that is adding authentication, right? So you have to be authenticated before you use this endpoint. But unlike, let me say, unlike the edit, right? We go to edit, copy this URL, come here and paste it, right? If you come here and paste it, you can see that because we have not implemented the login required mixin, it's free to be used by any user. So let's go and implement that. So simply come here, copy this and paste this, add comma, right? So if we now refresh again, let's refresh, you can see that this route is also protected, right? So the next thing is to make sure that's permission now, to make sure that the user that owns the book, right? The user that owns the book is able to update and delete the book, right? We don't want any authenticated user to be able to delete or update the book, right? So if we come back here, go to so the mixin that we have to import now is the user passes test mixin, right? You see how we use that. So if we come here, copy this and paste this here. Again, guys, we discussed these things in details in the Django generic views tutorials. Check it out if you want. So if we implement this right now, right? So after implementing this, there is a function, right? There is a function, that is an implementable function that we should override, right? That function is the test func, right? So test func. So this function returns true or false. If the condition returned here is true, the user gets permitted, right, to use the endpoint. But if it is false, the user gets denied to use the endpoint. So what is the permission we want to implement here? We want to make sure that that this book belongs to the right user. That's user.creator, right? If you go to our models, this user.creator, we want to make sure that the user.creator is also the user that is logged in, right? So what are the two objects that we want to get, right? The first one is the book instance, the particular book instance that we are trying to edit, right? The second one is the user instance, that's the logged in user instance. So let's say how to get the Queryset instance, right? So to get the Queryset instance, you use this self, right? After self, you say get object, right? Get object is a method, get object, right? So this will return the object, that's the instance of the book, right? So you can do like dot name or dot id or dot creator, which is what you are going to do, right? So this is how you get the Queryset instance. So how do you get the logged in user? How to get the logged, if I can spell, logged in user, right? So to get the logged in user, you also self dot request, right, dot user, right? So this will get you the user, the logged in user. This will get you the object, that's the book instance that we are trying to write the conditional for. So what is the conditional? I want to make sure that this user, this self dot object dot creator, right? So if you have been following the tutorial, you don't know that in our model we have this, in our book model we have this creator, right? This creator is the person that created the book, which is the user that created the book, which is the logged in user at the time that created the book. So you want to make sure that the logged in user is also the user that is the person that created the book, is also the logged in user, and the user that is to update, and delete the book instance, right? So we want to make sure that the self.getObject.creator is equal to the self.request.user, right? So this way, and then let's like I said, this function, let me reduce this. Like I said, this function right here, this, when you implement this user passes test, right, you have to override this function, right? So when you override this function will return a conditional if or false, right? If it's true, that user gets passed in, right? That user gets permission to use this endpoint. But if it is false, that user gets denied to use this endpoint, right? So we have to return this, right? So as simple as this. So we have to return this. Let's remove, or let me comment this out. Get how to get the Queryset instance. Let me comment this out, right? So that if you're looking at the code, maybe if you git pull the code from the GitHub repository so that you can see it, right? How to get the Queryset, how to get the logged in user, right? So let me scoop this up, right? So that's what we are doing here. So if we go back and let's go back and refresh, right? If we click on edit, you can see that the user is allowed to edit. The user can edit, let's send this book name to book 3, right, and description to description 3. So let's update. You can see that is updated, right? So let's try to create another user here. Let's say user 3, and password is, let me enter a password, right? Patience here. So let's sign up and let's go to login, user 3, right? Then password, login, right? So let's go, list of books is empty. Let's create a book for this user. The book is, let's say the name is from user 3, and that's the same thing as the description. Why not? So let's submit, right? So this user has a book. The user can edit it and the user can delete it. Why? Because it's logged in and because he created this book. But let's copy this URL, right? So let's copy this URL. So in this browser tab here, in this browser window here, opened here, this is for user 3, right? Why? This is for Hezekiah 1, another user, right? So let's say this user in any way gets this URL to update this user's, to delete this user's books, right? So if you come here and paste this URL, press enter, fingers crossed, you can see that he's getting a 403 forbidden. Why? Because this function here return false, because the self.getObject.creator is not the same with the self.request.user, right? So it's as simple as that. But this user is able to access it, is even able to delete it, right? So that's it for me today, guys. In the next tutorial, we'll probably be looking at, I said that in the next tutorial, okay, in the next tutorial, we'll be looking at how to use static files in Django, right? How to use static files, let's say static CSS files, JavaScript files, and stuffs like that, right? Then after that, hopefully I've been postponing this deployment process. Hopefully we go into deployment, right? So we'll have a GitHub repo right here for our codes. I'll leave a link to it in the description. If you want to get the source codes for this our tutorial, you simply have to come here, come to the branches. Each branch, any tutorial you want to have each source code, you click. You can see here we have these models and database. If you want to look at the tutorial for this, user creation, user login, user logout. If you want to look at the source code for each of the lessons that we have been treating in this playlist, you just come here, come to the branch, click on it. It will open the source code and you can git clone, git pull it, right? So that's it for me today, guys. Have a nice day. Turn up this, subscribe, like the video, share this video, turn up the notification for when we release new videos, and take care of yourself. Peace.